Briggs. I went to Humber for multimedia design and production. And then out of Humber, I started working at a company called Indus Blue that some of you have heard of, some people here have even worked at. And I've worked there for the last 5 years. The first 4 years at Indus Blue, I was doing all Flash development. So probably the same sort of things a lot of you are doing, ActionScript 3, working with advertising agencies, making sites a lot like the We Are grant that you just saw, although not that cool. So that's kind of what I was doing for the first 4 years at Indus Blue. And then over the past year, we've transitioned our company to become more of an iPhone development company. So instead of doing Flash development, we started learning Objective-C, and we started going full into iPhone development. So for the past probably 8 months, I haven't done any ActionScript 3, at work at least. But that's not really what I'm here to talk about. What I'm actually here to talk about is something I did in my spare time, which is an iPhone game called Trainyard. Some of you may have heard of it. It's doing pretty well in the App Store right now. And so you may be wondering, what is an iPhone guy doing here at the FlashinTO for Flash developers, whatever? Well, first, because it kind of makes sense because I was a Flash developer at one point in time. But it also makes sense because Apple finally released, or kind of lowered their restrictions so that you can actually develop iPhone apps with Flash again, which is great. So this kind of story could apply to anyone. It's not going to be very technical. It's just going over my whole process of, over the past year, what I did to kind of make this game in my spare time and bring it to where it is now. So let's just start things off. So this, it's a little hard to see because it's dark. The whole game is dark, so it's going to be a little tricky to see. But I'm not really going to talk about the game itself very much, but I'll just explain it a little bit. It's a puzzle game. The point of the game is you have these little trains that are different colors, and you have to draw tracks for them to follow, and they kind of hit each other, and you solve puzzles. That's it. There's no time limits, there's no score. The only thing you need to do is solve puzzles. So it's pretty different from a lot of games out there. So in May of last year, 2009, I decided I really wanted to make a game in my spare time. You know, I love playing games, a lot of you probably do, and I was like, you know, I have the skills with Flash, I know I can do this, so I'm going to make a popular Flash game. So at first I thought I was going to make a game for Congregate and maybe make money with ads and that sort of thing. So I started coming up with game prototypes, and I work in Liberty Village, but I live in Mississauga, so every day I take the GO train to work. It probably takes around half an hour, and I would just sit on the GO train with my little netbook and just have Flex Builder open, and I would prototype game ideas over and over and over for probably weeks and months, just trying to come up with cool game ideas. And I had a notepad, and I would write lots of game ideas in it. So this is the notepad that I was using when I first came up with the idea for Trainyard. And so when I came up with the idea for Trainyard, I was like, this is a really cool game, and I started making all sorts of puzzles for it. So instead of working on all these other game ideas, I started just making puzzles for Trainyard. So that was the start of the game. And at that time, it wasn't actually called Trainyard, it was called Paint Train. But so what happened is at Indus Blue at the same time, we started noticing that clients were kind of starting to wonder if we could do iPhone development. At that time, we didn't really do iPhone development, but looking at iPhone apps, they kind of look like things we could do. They look very similar to Flash stuff. There's still motion, you know, there's still a design element to them. So at work, we decided to start looking into iPhone development, and Dayton, who's my boss, who a lot of you probably know, he gave me and another guy at my work each a week just to do whatever we wanted with iPhone development without any other work to do, just to check it out to see what we could do. And so I decided to learn Cocos2D, which, if any of you have looked into iPhone development, you might have heard of it. It has an API that's very similar to Flash. So you can, it's got a display tree, it's got a kind of tweening system, it's got all sorts of stuff in it. So it's actually very similar to Flash. The only problem is that it's an Objective-C. So if you've ever looked into Objective-C, it's very weird looking. There's square brackets everywhere. It's a little daunting. But I spent that week, and I actually learned the basics of Cocos2D. And at the end of that work, I had nothing really to show, but I learned the whole time. And at that same time, because I was doing that for work that whole week, I realized that I had this Trainyard game that at that point was still meant to be a Flash game, and I was like, why am I making a Flash game? You know, I can do this iPhone stuff if I just try hard enough. So I'm going to switch it from being a Flash game to an iPhone game, and I think it'll make more sense there anyway, and I think there's a chance I can make more money making an iPhone game. So that was kind of the idea. But mostly just the fact that playing it on touchscreen would just be so much cooler. So, to the second bullet point, the first thing, at least for me, and you may have found this too, anytime you're learning a new technology, the first thing you build with it is often crappy. It's just like, you make mistakes, you don't know what you're doing, you just don't do a good job. And so, instead of building Trainyard right away, I built a different game called Quaddy that's just kind of like a ticket and sort of game, but I built it from the ground up and completely finished it. It had online high scores, it had everything. It was actually a pretty decent game, but I still didn't want to release it because I didn't want that to be the first game I released on the App Store. So I built it, it was completely done, never released. But with building Quaddy, I learned a huge amount of iPhone development. I made tons of mistakes. I probably rebuilt it from scratch 2 or 3 times, refactoring code, and I really learned a lot about actual iPhone development and kind of the pitfalls of that. So in winter of 2009, around October, I started iPhone development on Trainyard. And my plan was to finish developing Trainyard by the end of December. So I worked on it, and then by January 1st, the game was very far from done still. The basic engine was there, you could play it on the phone, but it was missing tons of menus, the polish wasn't there, all that sort of stuff. And it was just because over time I kept adding features. I just kept adding scope. It just wasn't in a place I wanted to be in, so I would just think, hey, it would be good if we did this and this. And like a lot of projects, tons of scope creep, and so it took way too long. So in January, I was like, okay, it'll probably take me a couple more months to finish this. But then at work, we had a really big project, which was the CTV Olympics iPhone app. So CTV, which was the official broadcaster of the Olympics, came to us at Indus Blue to get us to build their official CTV iPhone app for the Olympics. So this was a huge deal, and I ended up spending a lot of time, a lot of overtime, over a 2-month period, because there was a very, very hard deadline of having to make this app for the Olympics.
Rick Mason is awesome.
I spent basically all of January and all of February just making this iPhone app, and I didn't spend any time on Trainyard. So for 2 months, no progress on Trainyard. In March, I came back after those 2 months, and I was actually really excited about the project, despite being away for so long. So I started doing a whole lot of more work on it. I also did all the design work and audio work and all this sort of stuff for Trainyard. So I fixed up the graphics. I added all the menus and features I wanted it to be. One of the big things that's a pretty unique feature of Trainyard is that it has online solution sharing. So I kind of use my Flash background. What you can do is when you solve a puzzle in Trainyard, there are literally thousands of different ways any given puzzle can be solved. So I made it so that when you solve a puzzle, you click a button, a submit solution button, and it sends it up to a backend I made in PHP, and then it actually, you can go to the website on trainer.ca, and I have a Flash player for the solutions. So I took that prototype Flash version I had, and I actually used it to play the solutions in Flash on the browser for puzzles that you solved on the iPhone. And you can share them on Twitter, you can share them on Facebook. I did all that sort of integration. I created a puzzle editor in Air, because up to that point, I've been just editing puzzles in XML. I decided, I need a better way of actually looking at these, so I made a full Air puzzle editor with I could load files and save them out, whatever. And then by May, the game was almost done, but then something happened. My wife gave birth to our son Torin a month early. So I was planning on finishing Trainyard in May, but Torin decided, his due date was June 12th, and he decided to come a month early on May 11th, which is not a problem by me because he's awesome. So it was fine. So, but that was a pretty big surprise. I was like, okay, I'm going to finish Trainyard in May, and then Torin's going to come in June, and the game's going to be in the store, and it's going to make him money, and he's going to grow up happy and whatever. But that's not how it worked out. So, but it actually almost worked out better because of this, because what happened is I was given a full month off to help look after my son and help my wife out, which was, if any of you have had kids, it's a lot of work, but it's also really fun, and luckily when they're newborn, they actually sleep quite a lot. So in that month, I actually got a ton of work done, probably more work done on Trainyard than I ever had the rest of the project. And so at the end of May, I was able to finish the game, and I submitted it to Apple on May 30th. I spent the approval week, so I mean, a lot of you probably heard about the App Store, but the way it works is you have to wait for stuff to get approved, and it usually takes a week or two. So I spent the approval week starting to do marketing stuff, including making a trailer, and then the game was approved on June 7th, but I delayed the release to Thursday the 10th. The reason I delayed it to Thursday is because the theory is that Apple features apps on Thursdays, and the biggest download days are on the weekend. So if you release an app on a Thursday, by the time the weekend comes around, you'll have your app already high in the charts and more people will download it. And then so on June 7th, the approval day, when I knew the game was going to be released a few days later, I released the trailer. So I'll show you the trailer I made now. That'll give you a better sense of the game anyway, so we'll see if this works. If it doesn't work, sorry.
So this is all last summer?
This is, no, this is
Or this summer?
This summer.
This summer.
Yeah, this is
Nice.
So I apologize for the music. That was like a $25 piece of stock music. And that was actually, like, I took a picture of my finger and photoshopped it in and used it as a...
I saw that.
I get so many comments about how freaky that finger is. That video has like 60,000 views on YouTube now, which is pretty funny.
So you put a zombie finger for like...
Yeah, people said it looks like a zombie finger. Okay, so on June 10th, I released it for $1.99. I figured that was a good price. It wasn't too cheap, but it was, it was still a little bit more premium, which seems ridiculous because it's only $2. But on the App Store, that's actually a high-priced app almost. And I emailed tons of iPhone sites and blogs. It was really like a heartfelt email. It was like, I'm a little indie developer. Please help me out. Post my game, whatever. I posted a thread on Touch Arcade, which is this big forum for iPhone people. And then I told all my friends about the game on Facebook, whatever, and I was like, sweet, all right, now I'm gonna go straight to the top of the store. It didn't quite work like that. So the game wasn't a huge hit, but I did make around $30 a day, which may seem decent, may seem not, depending on where you're at, but it wasn't a huge amount. So this down here at the bottom, you can see the kind of sales charts. Each of those is one day. So the first day it launched, I did a big push on Twitter and all that. I made $140. And then after that, I dropped off a little bit. So I started, I tried advertising on AdMob, which is a kind of advertising service that's owned by Google, where you can advertise on the phone, and Project Wonderful, which is this awesome site where you bid on ads. It's basically all on webcomics, like Axstop, which is awesome if you've seen it. But yeah, so it wasn't that great. And so at that point, I experienced a bit of jealousy because the game wasn't doing that well. It wasn't like horrible. It was maybe decent part-time income, but it wasn't doing that well. And one of the big things in the iPhone world is Touch Arcade. They're like the hugest iPhone app review site, or game review site specifically. And they didn't even mention the game, said nothing about it. I sent them an email, nothing. And Apple didn't feature the game. So if you're not familiar with the App Store, Apple can choose apps to feature. They feature the apps every Thursday, and they stay up for a week. And those apps that are featured get ridiculous amounts of sales.